Hi guys and welcome to Get Your Reviews and to this video reaction slash review slash analysis. Okay guys, so I decided my future reactions, and in this case this Luton new video, are going to be just partial, meaning that I'm gonna focus on particular things, not on the whole video, not only because those videos are often extremely long, but I do feel that there's just no benefit to that for the viewers, for you guys, for me and for Luton, because if you haven't seen the full video, you should go and see it there like it's meant to be seen, and I do not want to in some kind of a way infringe on that as well, although it is transformative content. When you're covering something, it is something different, and the experience that you're going to have with me watching it and commenting on it is different. Now, because Luton specifically is one of the first guys that I found doing videos about 40k, and I have connected with his way of delivering information and to a point of his way of looking at things a bit deeper. So this is one of those videos, and it was a long time coming and I was very excited to see it. So now we're just going to see and comment on particular things that he said. So I'm assuming that you already went and watched the video, so you're going to have the context that you need to understand where Luton is coming from, and in this case mostly where I'm coming from and what do I mean when I explain certain things that he explained, and what do I think about his logic and all of that. What will I add to what he said and all of those things. So without further ado guys, now having this disclaimer out of the way, let's see only the key points of Luton's video and comment.
So things will get a little heavy as we wade into discussing some elements that touch on classical and quantum mechanics, the philosophical nature of time, and exploring both the different opinions of physicists and philosophers as to how we perceive time. And, just a reminder, I'm not a physicist, but I do my best in trying to understand this stuff. But I hope you'll see how this does tie into many things and is not just a waste of time, but is something that's quite critical to thinking about the 40k verse. If you care about it at all more than just, haha, big emperor memes, chainswords and orcs bashing heads.
Yeah, first thing I want to say guys is that, if you care more about the deeper meanings, these things are worth thinking about. The other thing is that I also want to do in the future is a video that I'm going to explain what in 40k is close enough, or how it is related to real esoteric knowledge, no matter if you believe in such things or not, or do I, that is irrelevant. The point is to make this comparison and to see how 40k draws from that, or what did it draw from real esoterical knowledge and what it didn't, how it differs. So that is very interesting. That's my own personal project that I totally can do. So I want to do that, and this is something similar that Luton is doing here. It's in a different direction, but still it is a bit similar. So let's continue.
The fact that you're watching this makes me already hopeful you're after something a little deeper than that. Overall, consider that one thing becomes very important to understand, and I perhaps already hinted at this while discussing Robert Guillerman's frustration on returning to the Imperium, only to find that its chronology was in disarray, the so-called chronostrife. Now this thing, I think, is suggested at within Dark Imperium and Plague War, that Guillerman begins to realize regarding the Imperium's chronological aberrations that resolving this is a nearly hopeless endeavor in the current state, that many systems will ultimately end up having to rely on local observations of time. This, in actuality, is likely the most sensible way for the Imperium to operate. In fact, as I will hope to explain, it is really the only way for it to be able to truly make any real sense at all. The concept of an established dating system used by the Imperium widely to determine a chronology of specific events is actually so flawed as to be near enough meaningless. In fact, this idea of having a galactic human empire that can react somehow in real time to things happening around the galaxy is also extremely flawed. However, in fairness to the 40k verse, this is actually demonstrated, because unlike most science fiction who choose to just ignore or MacGuffin their way around it, At least with the Imperium, we're sometimes told that, say, fleets of Imperial ships arrive to defend a world only to discover the planet is dead and has actually been for some time. And this illustrates one of the core and fundamental problems facing the Imperium, that they have to use the warp for both communication and to travel around the galaxy. The effects of the warp in terms of space-time, which are then compounded by normal time dilation and special relativity, means that ships could arrive earlier than expected, or, as seems to be more often noted to be the case, actually arrive far later. So does this mean then that the Imperium cannot operate in any kind of centralized way?
Yeah, this begs the question, when Nathaniel Garrow was traveling through the warp, how did he manage to go through it and to deliver the message to the Emperor? I mean, he could have emerged from the warp 10 years later and Horus could have been already conquered everything, who knows. So he managed to go through there, managed to meet Rocco Dorn, and he managed to still deliver his message. So he had luck, I guess, or something. Well, I did read the book, like I've said. I finished it very recently, but it's not very clear there. I mean, it's mentioned that the warp is messy and it's been chaotic lately, and then, Nurgle forces and that invasion happened. But the time is not addressed every single time, literally. Anyway, let's continue.
So it seems apt that we shall return to continue on with the most clouded and poorly understood period in the galactic history of 40k. Of course, it's the War in Heaven.
Okay, now we have reached something very interesting, like the meat of things, the War in Heaven. So yeah, let's see.
So much time has passed that it seems hard to remember now. But we pick up the story from the most ancient of times, where the Eldar were still in the earliest of days and a burgeoning race. The Old Ones are returning back to anxiously check on their new developing weapons of war. Empowered from their gluttonous orgy of devouring what had been the Necron tier, coupled with their subsequently new army of Necron, the C'tan waged war upon the Old Ones in what was we presume to be the Second War in Heaven. The C'tan were now at full power, unleashing forces beyond anything that can be comprehended within the modern days of the Imperium. Across the galaxy spread the ancestors of the living dead, raging a war against the Old Ones that had been the creators and protectors of the infant Eldari. They dominated the galaxy and the Old Ones were totally besieged. Worse, the C'tan had discovered an ever-plentiful source of sustenance in the many races that had been crafted and nurtured by the Old Ones across the many millennia since the beginning of time, and these were now like cattle for the insatiable hunger of the C'tan. It is even said that amid this orgy of destruction, the C'tan turned and fought amongst themselves for their entertainment. Planets were razed, suns extinguished, and entire systems devoured by black holes via the reality-warping powers of the star gods.
Okay, the C'tan sound horrible, those guys. Absolutely horrible. Oh, wow.
More radical speculations consider that as mortal races became more scarce, the C'tan again turned on one another, but this time in earnest, until only a few of their kind remained.
Basically, the C'tan are parasitic organisms. I mean, it's so hard to define. It's not clear how they are even fighting, how material they are. Okay, they took the bodies of the Necrons, became the Necrons, basically. And yeah, all of those things. Then they were defeated by the Necrons, fragmented. It's, yeah, well, we talked about this before, but it's basically a bit of a mess in terms of how we can comprehend what they really are. How are they made? I mean, what are they made of? So how can they be even hurt? All of those things.
I'll restate for clarity that most of our descriptions from this time are again very clouded or deliberately allegorical, and so should not be taken at face value.
Yeah, basically everything from those times is like, how can we make this as crazy as possible and as mysterious as possible, because it was million years ago, so who really knows? We're just gonna write it as this is a huge mystery, and well, the Eldar just developed in their own way, and all of a sudden they started to get twisted, and just they had everything, so all of those things. So yeah, you can't really say what the heck happened in detail back then.
We have nowhere near enough knowledge to know just how competent the old ones were when it comes to creating life. We can't know if they basically just got very lucky and were seeding planets almost at random, or did they possess the advanced knowledge to be able to craft specifically the life forms they wanted.
Yeah, my question is how are the old ones decimated? I mean, aren't there like not even material? How they're being able to be destroyed with weapons of any kind? That's just very weird for a race that can just create things. I mean, they sound like real gods, but at the same time they're just decimated. This is very weird. I just wish that there's like an explanation for that somewhere. I mean, in order to destroy something, you have to explain how it could be destroyed. First, what it's made of. Is it like dense energy? Like, what the heck is it? Energy cannot be really destroyed, it could be only transformed. So, how is this working? The only way for us to explain this, unless there's another information, of course, is that the old ones did had physical bodies and that enabled them to be destroyed in the first place. Because destruction, like true death, or in this case, like decimation, will be only possible if they are made out of something that could be impacted by something else, force that will be greater than theirs, and that could decimate them. But even if it does, then they will still have some kind of essence left. Well, I do know that the Emperor killed Horus with his sword, destroying his soul, which also doesn't make much sense to me, but yeah, I mean, like I've said, I do have to make a video about how 40k differs from esoterical literature, because otherwise nothing makes sense. They just decided that some things could be destroyed no matter what they are made of. It doesn't matter if it's air or energy of any sort. It just gets destroyed, and the consciousness, the soul, all of that is also destroyed, because souls are different and human souls are not, those that are getting reborn, but the Eldars are. So the Eldari are more advanced than humans. I mean, they're like superior in that way. So what I mean is that the Eldari before Slanesh was born were able to go back to the warp and then be reborn in new bodies, where humans just went to the warp and were not reborn. I mean, that part just kind of falls flat to me. I would think that the humans will have the same properties of their souls, but well, if you think about that, they're very young race compared to the Aldari, then okay, their souls are not evolved to the point where they can go back to the warp and then continue in new bodies later on Earth or something like that. I'm just wondering why whoever thought of that in 40k, why they would think that humans would not be able to be reborn. That is just very hard to wrap my head around, you can say.
Always asking the question about why are there no good or positive gods in the warp? Well, the warp in the current time of the 41st millennium, the age of the Imperium, we see how the galaxy itself is such a hellscape that if it were even possible for anything positive to be born into the warp, it's such a literal nightmare dimension that it's presumed that any good creations would be immediately smothered, consumed, or worse before it really even knew what was what.
I'm not sure about that. So you see, there's a lot of war. There's only war in 40k, but still, there's a lot of worlds. There are millions of worlds. They're still living on their respective planets, and they're not fighting all the time. I mean, some are not. Some are just living and just waiting for, like some chaotic space marine legion to drop and massacre them. But for some else, they're just living, so to speak, on Terra too. And if you're not making war, if you're not doing this massive negative thing that is war, you are doing the opposite of bad. You're actually feeding the good. So if something is prominent enough, it should have a presence in the warp then, by this logic. Meaning that if the universe is 50-50 war, or even if it was like 70-30 war, that 30% is still hefty enough in order to have a presence in the war, because it keeps on going, keeps on existing. Peace somewhere, even if it's like on 20,000 planets, is still existing, and it keeps on going before, of course, it's broken. But if it's not broken, just keeps on going. So that means that if it keeps on going in the material world, it's gonna keep on going in the warp. It cannot be just smothered by the negative forces, because it's still fed by what is happening in the material realm. And everything in the material realm echoes and imprints in the warp. So as above, so below, so to speak. We do have to consider that, I think.
It is possible that some of the entities referred to as Eldar gods could have been or were at one time old ones. Yes, it's possible. Or it may even be more confusing than that. Perhaps they were old ones initially, but as the Eldar shifted their perceptions, these figureheads were simply amalgamated and reassigned. They may have begun as old ones, and their representations moved sideways as creations of the Eldar, or even simply tales told within Eldar culture.
No. They're too intelligent for that. Well, that theory about that, the Eldar gods could be old ones, for me makes the most sense. Creating gods out of their butts. Who gave them those powers? Well, the old ones gave them their powers in the first place. They're super intelligent, advanced, but create gods out of their asses. No, I don't think so. Without knowing, just without realizing it. Now, of course, we all know about Slanesh, how they created him, but that was because they went into this spree of extreme excess of every bad, evil thing that could ever be. I mean, everything that it is in excess, is bad. Even if you drink a ton of water, you can die. So, yeah, that is another point. But the creation of Slanesh makes a ton more sense. Because it is a concentration of everybody's dark deeds and thoughts. The emotion, the strong sensations, all of that is energy that just concentrated, and this entity was birthed into an existence. But the other, just in their dreams, just like that, because they had these powers that manifested in such a way to create a being that's like totally different, in my opinion. Now, there is once again a connection between esoteric, knowledge and such types of creations. So they did take that from somewhere. It wasn't just made up from thin air, in terms of this theory or ways of thinking how something could be created. But as for the dreams, that really does not cover it. It has to be in some shape or form channelized and conscious, or if it's not, conscious in the way that, let's say that an elder does something super deprived and bad, and they know it, but they still do it because they get huge amount of pleasure in it. That qualifies as something that has intent and awareness behind it. So you know that something is bad, evil, deprived, but you enjoy it too much and you still choose to do it. That is something that it's made. That is a choice, and that creates a heftiness, a real substance to this deed, to what you're doing, because your perception of it gives it life, gives it real substance. And that is how you can actually create something. That is how something can be different, between just dreaming and unwillingly doing something and willingly doing something. It's very important why you're doing something. Do you realize what you're doing? Do you have the intent of it? Are you doing it by your choice or not? It's just so important, and it makes all the difference. So I do not think that they created their gods in their dreams or something like that, unless it's written right there and there somewhere in one of the books or codexes. But if it's not, it seems that Luton is just discussing theories here, like I am, adding to his theories. Yeah, I do prefer to subscribe more to the theory that those Eldar gods are ancient ones. It just makes a lot more sense that the same entities that created them will be their shadow gods or shadow figures. I mean, gods in the shadows, not really that on the front lines prominent, maybe a bit in the hiding, but still present, still guiding to a certain point of the Eldar's development. That is a lot more, yeah, and within the lines of evolution and yeah, and by evolution, once again, I mean natural progression of of anything basically, but it has to initially come from a powerful source that can burst something into life, and then that something should progress to the point of the source in order to fulfill its goal and to reach a level where that creation will be able to also now create life. But until that moment, it is still a race or whatever you can call it in development. Now, I have to also point out that just because I think that maybe this or that doesn't sound very plausible or does not coincide with any esoteric literature, that doesn't mean that 40k has to adhere to any of that. They can literally think about the unicorns that are tied to the tail with ant and still make sense in some kind of a way if they written this properly. But here are the cases that sometimes when 40k does adhere to or does match with some of the esoteric literature, it makes a lot more sense this way, at least to me, because this is the perspective that I am often analyzing. When something is getting closer to that, I instinctively search of the connection, because a lot of writers, authors, they purposely do these connections, but a lot of the times they twist and turn everything into their own narrative, which of course they can do because it's a fictional world. So in a fictional world, like I said, they can just think about absolutely anything and everything. But you know, to me as a fan, as someone that just has this background, and just hard for me to not connect 40k to it. I'm just trying to make sense of how things would work then in the 40k universe, because that universe is totally not our universe, and it's totally not what is written anyway, anywhere. It is 40k. So 40k, it is 40k. So it can be whatever the heck it wants to be. So don't get me wrong, when I analyze things the way that I do not impose nor my personal beliefs or what I've studied or what I think, anything like that. I'm just trying to analyze it. And sometimes I do hit some points that you guys confirm to me that I got this right or that right, because it is the case. So far, everything that I studied about 40k, it kind of turns out that there are some things that are intentionally matching with, let's say, esoterical knowledge or spiritual science. But some other things, it seems like they're intentionally changed or switched. Maybe like a hypothetical world, let's say, or if the powers of evil prevail in a particular way, how that will look like for the development of the whole universe and how life will be created then and there. So that's very super interesting in philosophical standpoint to think about. It is interesting from a lot of different aspects to think about, no matter what you read, studied, whether you have a background like I have or not, whether or not you have read different science fiction, fantasy books. it's interesting all around. So that's why 40K is so fascinating to me. But the point that I'm making here, guys, is that for you to not get me wrong, and that I am totally not wanting to enforce my ways of looking at things to 40K. I'm just trying to dissect 40K, understand better 40K, and try to make sense within the boundaries of 40K how things work there, how rules of the Imperium and Materium work there. But of course, there must be some kind of a parallel made so we can get maybe a better understanding and a perspective of what the authors of 40K, the ones that write the lore that we love so much, what are they actually trying to say. So that could help us, totally help us understand it, and that also can help us to be more confused. But any kind of a way, guys, the point is to dissect, to think about it, and just to exchange opinions and views. There's a lot of conflicting information within the books, the novels themselves, the codexes, some things that are contradictory to each other. Everybody already pointed that out to me as well. I also seen it now myself. And so a lot of things could be right or wrong, but until we can keep an open mind and just discuss things and see how they can work or how they can make more sense or less sense, it's a very good thing to do and to discuss.
Of their ancient creators would in time rise to galactic dominance. They would use the bright paths of the webway to strike far and wide, unleashing without restraint the power of their psychic might against the physically trapped Necron, often still referred to the Eldar in their history as Necron-Tyr. Their psychic warp-fueled powers sent the C'tan and Necron reeling. These powers were an anathema to them. These powerful psykers were something that they had never anticipated. Whether the Old Ones were directly in command or not at this point is seemingly irrelevant. The C'tan and Necron were facing now a powerful force who were fighting back and dealing significant damage in the process. No matter what destruction they attempted to unleash upon the galaxy, the C'tan and Necron could not slow or contain the Old Ones and their Eldari's relentless advance.
Very, very interesting. So they cannot have anticipated psychers, so they're not that knowledgeable, or they don't have perception of the future that something like that could happen, or they do not have a view of a progression of power that will allow such thing as a psyker to emerge, basically to become aware of the another realm and to become able to manipulate it, work with it. They cannot have foreseen this. Okay.
The tables had turned, and this now forced the C'tan, who had been disengaged for millions of years, not fighting in any real collective sense, to pay attention. Their dominance had led them to become complacent and turned again, simply feeding off what fruits the galaxy had to offer. The shocking emergence of the Eldar forced them to once again unify, push back against the Old Ones, and fight these new magicking allies. But yet again, as we continue further down the rabbit hole, this is where things do become considerably more vague.
Yeah, vague, confusing, all of those things. So basically, this is sounding like the C'tan are lesser gods, the Old Ones are very advanced but still lesser gods. Everybody sounds like they have not have helped anything that happened. I mean, they're all treated or written, you can say, like humans in a way, because they're reacting to themselves with qualities that you can really associate with humans. You know, how Necron-Tyr ask for immortality. I mean, they thought that immortality is going to help them not suffer in their own bodies and all of that. And the Old Ones were like, no, we're not going to share that with you. Why would we want to do that? Like acting all proud and smirk, or at least that is how Necron-Tyr saw them. That is how they view them, as arrogant and all of that. But in the same time, the Necron-Tyr acted like they're entitled to their power, like they must receive it from the Old Ones, like the Old Ones must give that power to them because they're the Necron-Tyr. I mean, all of them are like acting entitled and with a stick up their butt and something like that. So this is like children trying to communicate with all of those human qualities that are not qualities, they're the opposite of qualities, but stuff like pride and arrogance, all of those things mixed, and there's no even a sprinkle of wisdom, considering that those creatures, whatever they are, the old ones, and also the Necron-Tier actually existed for quite a while, especially the old ones, of course, especially the old ones. They're supposed to be those that are like traveled the galaxies and know what life is and how life is created, and they are themselves able to create life, and all of that is, incomprehensible to a regular human being, because it starts from a point which we cannot even reach, the point of creating something entirely different than yourself and then cultivating it, watching over it so it can grow and all of that. We cannot make the children analogy exactly here. I mean, I'm talking about a race, some other intelligent beings out of nothing. For these gods to not be gods at the end of the day, for them to interact with other races in this manner that is so immature, and then for that other race to basically try to take revenge on them by automatically getting into alliance with also powerful creatures that they don't know, but they trusted them right away, like fully, without even questioning them. I mean, at least not on time. It was too late by that point. I mean, all of those things are just like, oh my gosh, children, everybody, like children. So to me, they're all very lesser, lesser gods. If someone can even be qualified as a god, like God for real, they're very lesser gods to me. They reach that point where they can, create something, but they don't have the full on wisdom to perceive or foresee everything that's gonna happen in their development. Just no clue, like, that really sound like a lesser beings. I mean, they're only gods to humans, and well, everything else is below them. They can be perceived as gods, but in reality, they're just higher level beings that exist in a bit of a higher level plane of existence, or like more in an energy form, and also could exist in some kind of an energy form. But at the same time, they're still lacking any kind of a wisdom, and they interact with other races in a very human-like, emotional even way, and not objective and wisdom-like way. So, yeah.
According to the Necron, this led to the C'tan beginning what would be the eventual creation of their greatest work, to permanently seal off the material realm from the Imperium, thus trapping the Eldar's warp creations and greatly diminishing their power. This suggests to us, as I've stated, originally the warp and reality overlapped and bled together in a much more undefined way than now. To say though is that the Eldar's actions absolutely caused an initial disturbance within the warp, and so if you wanted to say anything specific, I feel that you could say that this period does set off a chain of causal events, which point to the fact that they likely begin a process which would, unbeknownst to them, eventually lead to their near total destruction and the fall of their race, far in the future from this point in time. Much of this is described via the Liber Chaotica as well.
Okay, I'm gonna stop it here for a bit. So he's saying basically that maybe, just maybe, all of those events that happened led to the creation of the Chaos Gods. Well, everything was chaos, literally. What was happening between all the races, Necron-Tier, Necrons, Eldar, the Old Ones, and lasting millions of years, that is the definition of chaos. Everything, whatever he mentioned, how the Necron-Tier became the Necrons, deprived of their emotions, all of that are negative events after a negative event after a negative event. And there's a lot of thought put into how to stop one another, which is also negative. And it kind of makes sense that the collection of all of that chaos and negativity contribute for the creation of the Chaos Gods. I actually think that makes a lot of sense.
Which is considered by many to be an irrelevant, unreliable, and overly imaginative text. However, consider this as a source we must, because information from these times is so scarce, and the Liber does describe with detail specific events and depictions that appear nowhere else. In the dark, unspecified final period of the war in heaven, the Necrons were apparently able to finally gain access to the Old One's webway, and it was here they would mete out their vengeance of having been denied their secrets of immortality so long ago by the Old Ones.
Oh.
They achieved this through a series of living stone portals known as the Dolmen Gates. The Necrons were able to turn the Old One's greatest weapon against them, vastly accelerating the ultimate end of the war in heaven. Curiously, the portals offered by the Dolmen Gates are neither stable nor so controllable as those used by the Eldari and the Drukhari. It's even said that by some unknown methodology, the webway can detect when its space has been breached by a Dolmen Gate, and its arcane mechanisms will attempt to seal off the infected spur from the rest of the dimension. Information to this end is, again, scarce, but it's said how the Necron turned their unimaginably powerful weapons against the C'tan, and then that they shattered them. The C'tan being made of the actuality of the universe itself, there's no way for them to be completely destroyed, but they were shattered and many locked away in the Tesserae extra-dimensional vaults of the Necron. And these are said to be one of the sources of their great power even now, and that they could provide the Necron with enough energy to allow them to outsit eternity. In fact, by some accounts, this was one of their original reasons for entering their great slumber at the end of the war in heaven. Why bother fighting our enemy if you can simply wait for all mortal creatures to just die by means of entropy? One Necron spoke to this, saying, "Through eyes far superior to any organic equivalent, she marveled at the interplay of molecules distorted and rent apart by the released energy of the god fragment. The thought that she harnessed the energy of this galactic predator brought a glimmer of satisfaction. It was but a small piece of the whole, yet it would burn for eternity, giving off its life force to sustain as it had once sought to feed off the lives of her people. It would be mistaken to think of the caging of the exostellar manifestation as a punishment for the betrayal of its whole. The far greater reason was pragmatic. When the stars themselves would gutter and die, when entropy had all but quenched life from the galaxy, this being and the others like it would sustain the Necron-tier civilization. Truly, they had mastered their destiny. Retribution was fleeting. Dominance was forever." Now, as a side note, this also points me to believe that the Eldar had already lost their immortality as their mythology suggests.
Okay, this might sound very, like, I don't know, epic, dominant, whatever you can call it, but it's actually very dumb. I mean, they will have no life whatsoever. Just sleeping, waiting for everything else to die. It's just so stupid, you know. The meaning of creation, life is development, reaching some other ways of understanding consciousness, learning so you can create more life, understand more things, and just getting into the next level, and not sitting in one place waiting for everything to die, being at one level, having this pompous and arrogant look towards everybody else. Oh, they're gonna die and I'm sitting here doing that nothing, ha ha ha. Well, at least everybody else are living and doing something. Well, you're just sitting in one place until like what end? To be smirk about it and at the end and say, well, we do have these god-like beings trapped in our devices, so we can, draw from them as much as energy we need to sustain ourselves, and we're just gonna sit like this and waiting for the galaxy to die. Ha ha ha. Like, there's not gonna be anything else, like, no life's gonna be created after the previous life is ended, or that previous life, let's say, the humans, they can evolve, continue living on and on and on. You don't know if they're gonna kill themselves or not. Maybe they're just gonna evolve. Evolve. Eventually, maybe into gods or something like that as well, which gonna take eons of time. And the Necrons, they're gonna sit on their asses and once again be like, well, but we are still here doing nothing. Okay, sit there and just do nothing. Like, bang on your metal heads and be very happy that you're not experiencing anything worth experiencing. Awesome.
By the end of the war in heaven, not during the creation of Slaanesh, as I feel this aligns better with the Necron's planned slumber. Before this though, and having shattered their star gods, the C'tan, it seems probable that after this vast galactic war, both the Necron and the Eldar were not at their most powerful. They likely had both suffered very heavy losses, and I believe this is another reason as to why they backed off from one another. This had been a truly apocalyptic galactic war. The Eldar were fighting, after all, as well at the behest of the Old Ones, not for themselves. The Necron were fighting against the Old Ones, but with the C'tan now ruling them. So again, not for themselves. And to that end, far worse, of course, was still to come for the Eldar.
And here's the far worse thing. Oh yeah, Slaanesh. Slaanesh, he thinks. Well, oh god, that's just so horrible. I mean, who drew? Oh, these images are horrifying. I'm just gonna stop it right here. So, guys, what to tell ya? This was very, very interesting. Now, about that last part, it kind of makes sense to me that, you know, the Necrons and the Eldar work together to close the warp. That thing where the two realities were once a lot more intertwined than they are now actually do coincide with some esoteric knowledge, but that is the topic of the video that I want to make. So yeah, it deserves its own video because it's not just that, it's just one of the things that 40k do take from, you know, esoteric knowledge, so to speak. So it's very, very interesting in any kind of a way, but it does make sense for the Necrons and Eldar to me to work together and close the war because they basically saw something, or they saw what it could come out of there, but probably they encountered demons or something else, and they maybe with their some kind of a knowledge that they had enough reasonable to decide that this is not good for the future of any material development. So it's better to close it and deal with it later, or deal with it like indirectly or something. But yeah, guys, that was a great video by Luton. I encourage you to go and watch the whole thing. Thank you very much for watching. This is very interesting. We all have to keep like an open mind and just to food for thought, you know, to use our brains and just discuss, because it's just awesome. You can always get to great conclusions with these things, and it's always great to use your brain power and just to pick things and to dissect things, you know, to think about that. It's just awesome material through and through. That's why I really love 40k, because you can dig in and dig in. There's still something else there, still something to discover, still something to think about. So let me know what you think in the comments, guys. As always, thank you very much for watching. If you'd like to support me, check the links down below, and of course you can become a member of the channel. You can join my OnlyFans for meaningful sex educational content plus fitness, and of course there's always Patreon for just regular support. But in any case, guys, till next time, thank you, G reviews, and let me know what 40k thing you want me to cover next. Bye bye, guys.